Hello and welcome to the Soap Dragon for another soap making video. This is my Baby Love soap, which was a bit of an experiment. The other soap for this month is the Battenberg one, not Battenberg one, and that involved pre-making some of the coloured parts and then pouring the rest. And I thought that was relatively easy, so I can try that again and be a bit more complicated. And in so doing, I became super complicated and super over the top, which is typical for me. So what I've got here is half of a batch of shea butter soap in blue, and I've got another half in pink, and I'm just cutting these into rods, or into blocks at the minute, and then they'll cut into rods. Problem being that my knife wasn't long enough. Something I learned with the Battenberg soap is if I cut the long log in half and try and work with two shorter rods, they interact with each other and knock each other out of alignment. So I thought if I do them as long rods, keep them as long, then that's not going to happen. But in so doing, I'm having a problem with getting the clean cut here, because I've got a normal size knife and a long size thing to cut from. So something I've learned, I need to use a wire knife or something like that to do that if I do these again in future. I don't think I will, because they were complicated and a little bit frustrating to make. So this batch, because it's my shea butter batch, I also use for soap dough, and I'll be using most of the offcuts of soap dough from this batch as well in the whole process of making the soap. So I'm at the minute trying to count and work out how many of each I need, because it was a bit of a calculation, because I had got 2 loaves worth, and I had one that's got more blues than pinks and the other one the other way around, so I can use up an even number of rods per soap. So it just meant I needed to think ahead and make sure I had enough when I was cutting these. So this is a really messy video. So I've essentially put in the first layer of rods and then covered them in a layer of white soap, and now I'm trying to get the next layer in and get them even before everything sets up. This was a lot more complicated than it really needed to be. I got really flustered in the process. I think what I should have done is been a bit more like I was with the Battenberg soap, where I actually having made one rod, I then poured one side or 1/4 of the soap at a time, so that I had time to let things set before I could put the next bit in. But I didn't do that here. I actually made up the whole batch of white, and then kind of had to wait for the soap in the moulds to be set enough for the next layer without letting the soap in the bowl set too quickly. So it ended up being a lot more stressful than it really needed to be, and took a lot more time than it really needed to take. Although I don't think any of the soap makers I follow would have done something this complicated. Really, doesn't make sense to do something this complicated. And it's not just this part of the soap. This ended up being a 4-day soap, because not only did I have to make the soap batch, the coloured batches first, and then the next day cut them and pour the main soap, because then there's a process that goes on after this, and then some days down the line, about a week after these bars were finished, I decided they weren't finished. I decided they weren't good enough, so I took them off the shelf again and then refinished them and added an extra bit of something that looked better. So this is me having a hissy fit, pulling out the rods, starting again, because it just wasn't working right. This is not a great day. Just to show that soaping doesn't always work, at least not when you're trying to be too ambitious. So I've decided that the soap is not, or the white soap is not thick enough, so I need to take it out and re-whiz it. Although if I do that, then by the time I get to the end of the soap, it's going to be too thick to get the last layers in. So yeah, I wasn't thinking at this point. I think I was kind of snowblindness. I just decided it needs to whiz again. I need to go again. So I don't think I actually haven't seen any soap makers showing their serious mistakes. So yeah, I'm showing the whole process, how I'm being honest about how badly I made a mess, really. And just to confuse myself, the soap design with the more blue rods I'm sticking in the pink mould, and the one with more pink I'm sticking in the blue, just to confuse myself even more. So I was really not helping myself in this situation. But you'll see that in the background there on the surface, I've got this great PVC cover. Now, I have already burnt the worktop a couple of times. I have burnt the floor with lye over the process of, this period of making soap generally. So I actually went out and bought some of this PVC table covering and then made it and cut it to fit the unit here, or the worktop here, and round to the side. You can't see under the camera. Frankly, because I didn't want to get yelled at anymore. So it's making me less concerned about the mess, because I don't really need to wipe down everything, although I am doing as I'm noting mess, really. I can be more kind of lax about doing the job and getting it finished rather than stressing about the other thing. And I've also learnt not to measure soap on the plastic, or not measure soap, to measure lye on the plastic, because the lye I've got kind of builds up a static charge and it resists this surface. So if I measure my lye, if I pour it into a jar from here, then the static charge kind of causes the lye to bounce a lot. So I put the scales and the jar in the sink and measure my lye in there, which is a lot easier, a lot safer. So finally I got all the stuff in there, and I left it for a day and then demolded. And now this is the offcuts, my soap dough, and I've just kind of marbled it together. And what I'm going to do is just wrap it around this soap bar. You can see I've had to trim a little bit off there, but having soap dough is great because you can fill the gaps. So it's rolled it out so it's just wide enough to cover the bar or the loaf. So this angle's not great. Sorry about that. So I've already got one in the background there, you can see on the tray. But I do like this wrap. This is pretty much the same thing I did for the Battenberg. With the Battenberg I just used natural coloured shea butter soap, and it looked more like marzipan. So this worked great for this. So I'm just using a little bit of water just to make it stick. You can use alcohol as well, but I think water works a bit better. It slightly dissolves the soap. It makes it sticky. Now I found it's easier to do 2 or 3 sides at a time and then kind of roll out the next bit and do the last side. And I'm using the cling film here to kind of help me wrap it, because it's not going to stick on its own. It'll need a little bit of pressure, a little bit of help to wrap and stick. I like it as an idea, and I will certainly use this idea again. I've got some tube moulds that I'm now using, so I'm tempted to do a wrap in a tube mould by using soap dough. So that's a possibility. You might see that one in the future. So I've got pretty much 3 sides done, making sure to push out any air bubbles, smooth it out as much as possible. Now I'll just cut the edges as straight as possible and then roll out the next section. And I'll just leave this one wrapped whilst I'm waiting for the next section to go on. So it's added work, so this is day 3 of making this soap, but I think it actually works. So this is, well, essentially day 4, because I left that for 24 hours just to kind of just to settle the wrap. I don't want to disturb it too much. Okay. And it's almost perfect. You've got a couple of the rods that shifted, so I wasn't quite happy with it, but I think it's good enough. Now this is my original idea for the finish. Just a little bit of gold mica and a stamp. Now, wasn't that impressed with that. I did the full set. I did the full 20 and stuck them on the rack for a week and just thought, no, I need something else. So in order to change this design and make it look actually closer to the design I originally had, I've got these little metal heart cutters. Now my original plan was to actually cut out the centre of each of these soaps and then exchange them so that I would have the heart of one block in the centre of the other, but the soaps are too thick and the cutters are too thin, so I wouldn't have been able to get through the soap, let anything else. So instead I'm cutting down maybe about 4 or 5 mil and just trimming out this surface, just making a little pit in here and getting rid of that bit of gold mica I put on there, which I really didn't like in the end. And then I'm mixing up some more soap dough. So I've got one set that is pink and white and the other set that's blue and white. So I cut them into the same size heart as the chunk I'd taken out, which actually made more sense. It made more sense to do that than it did to actually put the little hearts on. And this is closer to skills I know, really. I used to do a lot of sculpting and that kind of thing, so this is an idea I am more aware of, more used to. And that pile of odds and bitsits and whatsits beside me is going to become lots of soap balls, because I've got a galaxy soap I want to make in November, and at the minute I've got a hell of a lot of planets already gathered together. So I started for the fill of these by just kind of packing a little bit of extra soap dough where I'd gone a bit too deep. And then stick one of my hearts in, so my hands are completely in the way. And just kind of work that into the hole. And also, as I've gone around these soaps, there are a couple of soaps with a little bubble between the layers, so I've been able to kind of fill that in with the appropriate colour of soap dough just to make sure it doesn't stick out too much. So I fiddle about with these a bit more than I need to. Then all I'm doing is just taking a blade and just taking the surface off to take it down to level. And this way you get rid of kind of the mottled top where it's very white and very blue. And then you get to see the colours that are underneath it all mixed up. So now I'm going back to my cutters. And this is a different soap. You notice it's got a pink heart instead of a blue one. And I'm using these cutters to just create an outline, just to make them a little bit more pretty. And this is actually closer to the original design I had, which was actually designed by a friend. I gave a couple of friends some of my fragrance bottles when I was thinking about designs, and there are 4 or 5 of the designs this year that are based on designs by other people. So a little bit of gold mica, a little bit of alcohol, I could have used water again, but alcohol evaporates faster and it doesn't kind of awaken the soap, doesn't make the soap soapy. So I'm just putting a little bit of gold just on the inside of one of these little gold markings, just to give it a bit of flair. That is what I wanted in the beginning.